Okay, so welcome to the second webinar. Okay, welcome to the second webinar of Astropreneurs. For the ones who haven't attended the first one, which was in December, it was an introduction about two programs, namely Copernicus and Astropreneurs, which was hosted by IBN, IPN from Portugal, and Verhaert. But before we introduce you to this second webinar, we would like to give you a brief overview about what you can expect for the upcoming hour. So first, I would continue by explaining the ecosystem of 2019, about the benefits of implementing space technologies in your company / startup. I will connect it with 6 examples from the partners of Astropreneurs, who are brokers, and I will finalize with the business incubation statistics. Afterwards, my colleague Annalisa Donati from ESPI will give you an introduction about the space ventures in Europe. So this webinar is organized.
You don't see the slide. Maybe ask if everyone sees the slide.
Can everybody see my presentation? Oh. One moment, please. My apologies. Die muis werkt heel slecht. Okay, so the webinar is organized by all partners. Could you even vergroten? Sorry. So, zoals een gewone presentatie. Okay, so this presentation is organized by Astropreneurs. Together with 7 other countries, we have the aim to support 150 startups by the end of June 2020, which is next year. And our aim is to actually break down the barrier to actually implement space technologies. And then I would like to continue by explaining the different space technologies by giving some background. Yeah. So here on Earth, we have a really niche industry that only focuses in the development of very innovative technologies. Those technologies has the focus to be implemented for space. And those technologies, we can separate them in one of the 8 different segments. So the first one is satellite data and communications. Then we have the organizations that only puts the focus on life sciences and medical equipment, which actually implies the health of the astronauts before their mission and during their missions and afterwards. We also have the hardware, robotics, and automation, which is necessary when a mission is becoming too dangerous for humanity. We have materials that can occur really rough environments. We have the group that focuses on positioning, orientation, and navigation. The energy of today is mainly solar panels, but we are striving to find other ways to provide ourselves with independent energy sources. Then we have the electronic software and sensors, and at last we have the precision mechanics and optics. It will actually be a waste if we don't use the space technologies only for space, and therefore it's very urgent and necessary to implement it within the European industries. In many cases, when transfer happens, it can be becoming one of the upcoming 7 groups. So we have the group of medical, We have environment, also for transportation, the group of communication, sustainability, industry, and the entertainment information. And I would like to give you now 6 different examples of successful transfers that happened in Europe. Sam? Yeah. Okay, so those technologies that has been developed for space is actually developed by specific characteristics. They should be low weight, strength, durable, efficient, reliable, compactness. It should also be temperature resistance, and of course the radiation should be strong enough. So we actually are implementing the space technologies from above and look down to Earth to actually smarten up our current system. Yeah. So are you actually using space technologies to innovate? So this is the first example of Marshall technology, which is now introduced into Mila's equipment. So the Marshall technology was a technology that has been developed to detect dust. Dust in space becomes really dangerous, especially for satellites. But this implementation of detecting dust is actually a huge advantage for people with allergies. And the vacuum cleaner indicates if a carpet, for example, or at home, you need to vacuum clean. It gives an indication. Then next is Rosetta for bedbugs, which is a transfer happened in the UK. Rosetta, together with Philly, was studying the surface on chemical compounds in the comet 67. Those chemical compounds could also be detected to indicate if a hotel room was poisoned, I would say, with bed bugs. And for that, it became a really huge advantage to actually collaborate together with TripAdvisor so that people, before they book a hotel, could actually know if the room was bed bug free. Then the third one from Portugal is a combination of geodata from Sentinel-1 and 7. Sentinel is Copernicus data, which actually includes wind data, rain data sets, and therefore this data set become from a huge, valuable impact on enterprises that need to make decisions. And one of the examples is Fidel Sail, which are wind turbines, and for that they used the data from the Copernicus satellite. Okay, the next one is a development of Germany. It's actually it's a new Hubble telescope, the 0.1. This telescope is accessible to the public, but also not really for the public because you have to write for permission. But therefore, it's open for scientists, educational institutes to actually see and to do research and to support science even more. Then the next one is a tryout in France, which is the sun-kissed public lighting. This lighting became independent and completely off-grid by using solar cells and systems that has been used for the space stations, but also for satellites, the launch platform, and the starships. And then the last one, which is from Spain, it was a development to actually detect the health of astronauts if their liquidity was imbalanced, especially in an environment without gravity. It's really important that their liquidity is imbalanced. Now this technology is being used to actually see how the liquidity is in Hamon, and therefore it becomes a really urgent qualification certification. Yes. So what does that actually mean for startups? These are numbers from ASAP BIC, and as you can see, it's a rising trend that more and more startups got the opportunity to get supported by a really big company as ESA to implement technologies and to actually support the European industry even more. So if you are interested in getting support by using space technologies or becoming part of the space network, please don't hesitate to contact the colleagues from Belgium or the colleagues from Astropreneurs. We are very happy to help you and to give you more guidance towards this space connection. And I would like to give you now the opportunity to my colleague, Annalisa Donati, by explaining the space ventures in Europe 2019.
So I don't know if everybody can hear me, if I am already connected.
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. So basically, I would like to start by introducing a little bit myself and also the European Space Institute. I would like to thank you everybody for being here today with us in order to understand a little bit better which are, here we go, which are the trends within the entrepreneurship, as we call it. And so I will drive you a little bit together with my presentation, and I will give you additional details. I don't know if you can already see the screen or not yet. Can you see it?
Annalisa, we hear and see you.
I think you cannot see my presentation yet, right?
No, it's okay. You should now put your presentation on big screen so we can see everything.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Good. So basically, again, thank you everybody. My name is Annalisa Donati, and I recently joined the European Space Policy Institute. I've been working before at the European Space Agency, so I just want to make a little comment. It's not a company, it's an intergovernmental agency, so this is a little bit of a difference. But anyway, the European Space Policy Institute is an independent think tank, and we provide our stakeholders with informed views on the space sectors. Space sector, and the SP is in Vienna, is located in Vienna, and it was created in 2002 after a decision of the Council of the European Space Agency. And basically what we do as a lot of research institution is to provide and promote the space policy at a global level. We do also create like networks, and we have events on specific topics concerning the space sector itself. We facilitate the exchange of information between different organizations, and of course we provide, again, like stakeholders and decision makers with informed views on the space sector at large. We have like two founding members, which is the European Space Agency and the Austrian Center for Research and Innovation. And afterwards, we have like additional members, which are ranging from big industries to other European institutions like European Commission and national space agencies as well. And again, if you don't know ASPI, please follow us online. We have different accounts on social networks, and also like our ASPI online website where you have all the reports that you might be interested in. And for what concerns the space venture, so let's go directly to the topic of the day. And basically, this study was born to fill a gap because we had the feeling that while in the US, for instance, this trend was thoroughly studied and investigated, in Europe there was the need for having a better understanding of what is going on in the sector for what concerns startups and really like small, very innovative and disruptive companies. So the objective of the study was to provide this European perspective, and it is divided in two main pillars. And you have on one side the database, which provides quantitative data on the amount and on the number of deals concerning private investments towards startup. And on the other side, we build up a survey that is comparable with a previous survey which was done to describe a little bit the main feature of a general startup. So we can provide a little bit of the main differences between the space sector and the startups at large. What we started from is basically a previous study, which was done to a little bit analyze the new space trend. So for what concerns new space, there is not, let's say, a common, broadly accepted definition of this phenomenon, but it's basically a disruptive sectoral dynamics that we managed to feature several interrelated links and trends, which can be summarized, as you can see here, in new industry verticals, in innovative public procurement and support schemes, which are focused on the new features of the new entrants and the new entrepreneurs, which provide a different business models, which are more disruptive and based not only on technology innovation, but most on product, process, business innovation. And we have also, we could see a substantial rise in private investments and innovative industrial approaches. So what makes those companies different from the past is that they are much more innovative and proposing like new business models. We saw then that after the emergence of commercial market in some specific areas, which could be, for instance, the satellite com imagery or launch services, there were more and more room for the implementation of programmatic agendas of public agencies by industrial companies. So this creates this trend that we are actually currently analyzing. So what we could see, studying a little bit and building up our database, is that there was a steady growth of private investment towards European startups starting from 2014 to 2018. You can see from the graph that actually the ratio is almost 4 times bigger than what it was in 2014. We recorded over the period 113 private investment deals, and for an amount that it's more than 500 million euros. So what I want to also highlight is the fact that this is a very conservative number, because we, this, let's say, providing the definition of startups, and we used a very conservative definition, which is based on the European Commission decision of 2003 about SMEs, and we wanted to actually keep the scope limited to what we consider a startup. So this number is not taking into account, for instance, big deals which have been done towards like more mature companies. So the number actually would raise until 1.7 million in the same period. And so having like a little bit of breakdown of which categories of private investment have been directed towards space startups, we realized that actually there is the vast majority of the deals involved venture capital, and especially early stage venture capital rounds for especially Series A and B. And let's say that those investments are basically characterized by an high risk, high return model, which is basically the typical instrument that startup would need when you have a very innovative and business model. As you can read here, I'm providing a couple of numbers just to give an idea and a little bit of feeling of how much venture capital has been used in order to support private startups. However, it's also very clear one of the findings of our study was that the majority of the investments are directed towards big deals and a couple of very successful industries. Here you have the fifth most successful and that managed to get the majority of the investment, and that are providing again like innovative and disruptive solutions for the space sector. So what we also wanted to understand, it was a little bit of the geographic distribution of those investments. And here in the map, you can see that for sure the big champion in this let's say private investment dynamic is for sure the United Kingdom. United Kingdom stands out as a leader in the space entrepreneurship trend in Europe. Basically for like several reasons, which ranges from a set of specific policies which were implemented in order to really like nurture and grow this startup environment in UK. Another interesting finding was that I mean, for what we can see, there is a limited connection between public budgets and this dynamic of private investments. Indeed, also like France and Germany still count with a very good level of investment. It is definitely three countries which are not standing as a big contributor, for instance, of the major like ESA and EU space programs. So we have like for sure United Kingdom as first, and then Ireland and Finland. I would like just to highlight the fact that this presence of Ireland and Finland can be explained because they have like one of the previous champions that I was mentioning. So for what concerns Finland is basically because of the big deals which ISI managed to gather to develop their constellation, and for what concerns Ireland is also due to one specific company which managed to get 50 million for an undisclosed consortium from Hong Kong, and the company is called Aralis. What we also were interested into was trying to understand in which segment of the space value chain were those companies located. So if there was a specific like interest in some solutions or not really. And we found out, and what was very interesting to understand was that basically the upstream sector was more than doubling the investment that were going to the downstream sector. While analyzing this, we basically realized that having right now a more and more vertical integration in the space sectors, of course, investments in the companies that consider that themselves working in the upstream segment, of course, are benefiting and are affecting also those that are working in the downstream sector. And also another reason for this really like overvalue of the upstream, it's because it's difficult to track downstream related companies, because of course for downstream companies the majority of the time space might not be their core business, but only an enabler for the producing of different products for end users. However, it is definitely clear that the space sector is benefiting from also investment in other sectors. Right now, what we managed to see was this growing cross-fertilization between also space and terrestrial technologies. As Luisa was rightfully explaining before, right now, a lot of technologies that have been developed and a lot of products that were developed for the for space missions were actually used also for terrestrial uses, and through the means of spin-off technologies and of technology transfer. So this is basically the second part, which is what we called a little bit the startup profile, and those are the results coming out from our survey. And we sent out the survey to more than 300 European space startups with a rate response of around 100%. We consider definitely the sample as a significant sample, because we got companies from 13 different European countries, and very well distributed along the value chain that I showed before. So what we can see about European space startups is that it's generally a very young SME with an average of 2 to 3 founders, and are employing not more than 10 people. However, what is a very positive sign, and that makes us believe that actually this trend is growing and is very steady in Europe, is the fact that the majority of them have recruitment plans for the future. Recruitment plans which ranges from like at least the 84% of them recruiting at least one person within the next few months, to 26% of the respondents that have more ambitious plans, aiming at employing 6 more employees in the next 12 months. And what it's even more interesting for us was to understand which kind of product is our space start providing, and which kind of innovation they propose to the market. It was very interesting for us to understand that basically space startups are definitely innovation driven, much more than any other startup in the sector. And we count for again, as you can see in the graph, which is on my left, for 71% of respondents, they believe they have a product that is worldwide innovation. 60% are, globally pioneering technologies. 47 consider their business model as unique in the world, and 41% implement highly innovative industrial processes. So even more interesting is that when we go to the graph, to the chart, which is on the right side, this is a comparison, as I was mentioning earlier, with the European Startup Monitor 2016, which is another survey that was deployed among a vast number of European startups. And basically, what we find out is that for what concerns, for instance, the global reach, space startups for the 63% address already global markets. So they are not only able to provide a very innovative product, technology, and new business model, but they are also able to really address global market from the very inception of their products into the market. We also realized that actually space companies have a very positive and optimistic evaluation about the business situation, and they consider actually themselves of being experiencing, let's say, a very satisfactory and good state of affairs, and the 73% of them foresee an even better situation, an even better business scenario for the future. And this somehow was for us a little bit a surprise when we went deeply to analyze the market dynamics. So for what concerns the market dynamics, we saw there is a little bit of discrepancy, because space startups consider the space sector rich in opportunities, both in innovation and in commercialization. However, space startups feel confronted, let's say, with a faster rate of technology development, and this suggests, as I was mentioning, a discrepancy between the pace of innovation and the pace of adoption of that specific innovation. And this can be explained for a little bit of characteristic of the space sector, which is a certain reluctance from customers to adopt unproven solution, let's say, and so making, let's say, the path towards commercialization a little bit more difficult compared to other sectors. From what you can see here, we also realize that the difficulties faced by the space startups are basically relying on the demand side. So they feel like a bargaining power of customers. They feel a high bargaining powers of suppliers as well, higher definitely than startups in other sectors. And there's here again several factors that can explain this strong bargaining power, which are, for instance, like let's say a market which is not yet mature, with the low demand or a little bit of lack of awareness of the use of space products, and a concentrated demand, or for instance situations of oversupply in certain specific domains of the space sector. And this brought us to believe that actually space startups believe they are operating in a rather hostile business environment, with an intense competition, so with a bargaining power of both suppliers and customers, and also the fear of potential entry in the new entrants in the market, and the difficulty also to enter in such a market. And as I was mentioning, these of course contrast with a very positive outlook on the business situation that they are experiencing. But this made us believe that those startups in the space sector, they have the perception of being very well backed from both financial and non-financial instruments provided by the public and private sector. So indeed, I mean, we saw that when we asked them about if they benefited already from financial or non-financial support, or if they would in the future ask from financial or non-financial support, we realized that 60% of them have already benefited from at least one type of financial support, that the majority of them benefited from governmental support, and that is also like what they are planning to do for the future. So there is this feeling that the public sector is backing the startup in the space sector. For what concerns non-financial support, again, as you can see, the majority, 56% of the startups already benefited also from non-financial instrument of support. And what they are most interested in the future is definitely networking events, which would give them the possibility to enter in touch with potential customers and potential investors. And also like mentors, so it's independent expertise. This is something that is very seek for from startups, and definitely competition. Competition gives the possibility to actually share ideas, to make it in common, to have a sort of crowdsource to develop even more disruptive products. This reflects very well what are the main challenges of space startups. So here you have like a short summary of what they told us. And indeed, I mean, what is interesting to understand is that for space startups, the biggest challenge they are facing is not, for instance, raising capitals, which is as well one concern of space startups, but is more or less in line, as you can see, 15% against the 12% of all startups. So, of course, raising capital is a common, let's say, concern of small companies in general, but the biggest concern is definitely sales and customer acquisitions. So this is why in the finding of our study, it's very important to highlight the need to support the demand side through new instrument, which could give the possibility to have contracts, so to sell products to the brand new startups. Here again, we have like an analysis basically of which are the expectations of those startups from the public actor. As we said before, the public actor is paramount and core to support the startups. And here we collected, for instance, some expectations, which would be, first of all, to have a more entrepreneurship-friendly environment, which would feature like improved changes between politics, startups, and established company, a better cultural acceptance of entrepreneurship, so a better risk let's say, acceptance, which would be done and that is implemented, for instance, through instrument of private-public partnerships, which means like a shared risk between the public and private actors. But also what we can see is like definitely the reduction of administrative burden, which for a startup is definitely one of the core and most important points. For what concerns the key findings, here again you have like an overview of our T13 findings. Of course, to have a better understanding and to read through all of them, which have been characterized with all the different features, you can go on our website and download our Space Venture 2019 study. But just to give you a little bit of the flavor and the overview of the key finding, we realized that the private investment in European space startups, of course, exhibits a massive growth since 2014. And again, the ratio is 4 times the value of 2014. The investment is concentrated in few large transactions, as we saw earlier. The space entrepreneurship is widespread across Europe, and although we saw that there is definitely one champion in Europe in provide the right conditions for the space startups to grow, we saw that anyway there are more than 13 countries that replied to our survey, and that there are deals more or less widespread in Europe at large. We saw also that there is a limited correlation between national public space budget and the intensity of domestic entrepreneurship. Indeed, as I mentioned earlier, there are multiple forces at play, including, for instance, domestic entrepreneurial and financial ecosystems, or the national policies that, for instance, the UK put in place in order to help startups to grow. And the investment in the space sector is full, but synergies with other sectors, as we saw. I mean, cross-fertilization is definitely a trend that we can see growing, and vertical integration inside the different companies is also like a feature that it's going to be very important also for the development of disruptive products. For what concerns the European startups, we saw that are again like a small enterprise and small SMEs, let's say. Space startups are also very innovative and globally oriented. And I provided you also within the presentation with some elements. And the space sector offers definitely fertile ground for entrepreneurship, and most of the venture we realized are actually structuring their value proposition around the new space trends, which means like new technologies, CubeSats, system miniaturization. As Luisa was saying before, I mean, the weight is very important in a space mission, because basically you pay per kilo. So in order to reduce the costs of also testing something in orbit, I mean, it's very important to have like as less weight as possible. And this is also the reason why, for instance, CubeSats are very attractive right now. And compared with other sectors, space startups perceive, as we mentioned, their business environment rather hostile, but are also very confident in growth prospects for the future. And what I can say is like space startups are expecting additional financial and non-financial support, particularly from private entities, from public entities, sorry. And space startup highly value networking and mentoring, as I mentioned, because generally, I mean, the very young companies that need somehow to be like supported also for what concern like the development of the program and also like strategies for the business growth of the startup itself. And last but not least, we can definitely say that space startups have higher expectation from politics than other startups. So they expect more support from governments, than other startups to conduct their business, for instance, and desire a much more entrepreneurship-friendly environment. This is something that we realize being one of the major differences with the US, for instance, where there is a completely different understanding of the entrepreneurship culture, and this is somehow felt from the startups as an obstacle to grow and to I mean, let's say, scale up from a startup to a well-established and mature company. So I guess that's my time is over. I don't know if we manage also to have additional questions, and if this is not going to be the case, you can read here my email address. Please, I mean, don't hesitate to write me comments and questions, and don't forget to visit the SP website and to download our studies. Thank you very much. I don't know if Luisa is taking back the floor, and maybe we ask her some questions.
Okay, thank you, Annalisa, for this wonderful presentation. Let's give now all the attendees 1 or 2 minutes to formulate some questions, and then we can divide who will answer the proposed questions. Voila.
Good.
Are there any questions? Okay, apparently there is no questions, Annalisa. So then I will close this second webinar. So I think we have demonstrated that the space industry knows many different opportunities for startups to actually develop and become part of this space network. Please, if you have more questions, contact us. You can find all the information on the website of SP and of Astropreneurs. You can always contact us directly, so please do so. I would also like to make a little promotion for the next webinar, which will be held the 16th of May. And this webinar is about introduction of other programs as Astropreneurs and several others. More information will be published soon on the website of Astropreneurs. And in June, we have another one which will be more based on technology transfers and brokerage processes. So I think, Annalisa, we can close this webinar.
Well, if I may, I wanted just to add on top of you just said that it is very important, this activity of, let's say, training somehow and information for people, because the majority of the time people doesn't know the importance of space, and that space is, it could be also an enabler for a lot of different other activities in other sectors. And this is also why I wanted to put the accent very much on the cross-fertilization of different sectors. And yeah, make space.
Yes, indeed. I completely agree with you. So it was my pleasure to host this webinar. I hope everybody liked it as well. Oh, we have one question apparently, Annalisa. How do you see Brexit affecting the space sector?
Well, again, this is kind of a core point. I would suggest our audience to go and visit the SP website, because there is a very interesting position paper which is called Brief, and it's addressing exactly this topic about how Brexit could indeed affect like the European market. And I mean, for the time being, definitely the UK will still remain part of ESA, which is giving a lot of opportunities also to European stakeholders and countries not part of the European Union. But there's a lot of uncertainty right now on the future of startups in the UK and how they will deal with which is going to be the relationship with other countries and with the EU itself. But definitely for a more informed position, you can go and read our position paper.
Okay, so we actually refer also to the website. And thank you for your prompt response, Annalisa. And hereby I would like to close this second webinar. Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.